You're listening to the Yeshiva of Newark podcast. I'm your host and curator, Rabbi Avram Kivelevich, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
If it's Erev Shabbos Kodesh, this must be Rizka Daraisa. I'm here with Rabbi Yosef Gabriel Belchafer and Rav Meir Schiller. We find ourselves in somewhat of a quandary today, Rav Meir Schiller and Rav Yosef Gabriel Belchafer and I, because our last program has really impacted our listeners, and we've gotten quite a bit of feedback and responses, and a lot of it was negative. And really interesting how some people thought that we had undersold the JLT, the Just Like Torah side, and some of them thought that we had actually impinged the reputation, despite Rabbi Skate's positive words, of the Thank You Hashem movement, and that we had not really given it enough credit. We want to play one response that we got from Hagoyin Rabbi Yosef Gabriel Belchafer's brother-in-law.
I believe it has many valid issues that were touched upon, but have nothing to do with whether Thank You Hashem is portraying a Yiddishkeit that's a distortion or not. Okay, it wasn't about, is Thank You Hashem just a hook? It's obvious from the JLT video that they are upset about something much bigger than that. They're upset about the whole portrayal of Judaism as these ancillary activities, such as flying around the world to different kfarim at different times of the year, and eating challahs, or going to Uman, or the Baba Sali's carpet, or all these other magical, enchanting experiences. And they're not focusing either on learning the meat and potatoes svarim or keeping the halacha, whatever way you want to read it. It's a real distortion of the whole religion. And that's what should have been addressed, if you ask me. And Rabbi Schiller's continued harping on the yeshiva system, it has a little bit to do, but it's not addressing the video. He just keeps going on and on about the system and how it somehow should be revised and injected with some variety in the learning and Yerushalayim and those type of things. The real heart of the matter, my brother-in-law addressed a few times, was where is the focus on actual working on your character, working on your avodas Hashem, working on your amelis b'Torah, working on being a better person, husband, student, teacher, all self-improvement, which is really what the Torah is all about. And they're going at it by firing that salvo, as you put it, to hit that, because Thank You Hashem is just talking about trips and different type of pleasures in a certain sense in the guise of heilige Sachen, and that wasn't addressed. I hope I'm being clear, even though, like I said before, all four of you are much smarter than me. But I am unfortunately very disappointed in how the issue was handled. The points that were made, I think, are good points, but it didn't address the JLT video directly.
We actually had another response the other way. There were many people who were disappointed with how we dealt with Thank You Hashem movement. They thought that we had undersold them. There were people who really felt that we had not given them enough credit. We had implied that they weren't really into Torah in any real way. And supposedly that was something that was not true. I want to read to you a letter that was sent to us from one of our former Talmidim, a person who listens to our show often. Was a bit surprised that the conversation wasn't contextualized in the broader Hasidim versus Misnagdim debate. He writes, from my perspective, the TYH movement is just an extension of the Neo-Hasidic movement. To me, it seems like they're catering to the same crowd, those who may not fit the yeshiva model, and are looking for more inspiration in their lives and a deeper emotional connection to Hashem. This is similar to the Hasidic movement. Hasidus offered a way for the non-elite to connect to Hashem through the tzaddik, davening, good deeds, and song. Many of the themes of the TYH material can be traced to Hasidus, a focus on the love Hashem has for every Jew, and how every Jew is important in the eyes of Hashem, which fosters an increase in Ahavas Yisrael. But then I saw the slogans of the JLT, which were clearly anti-Hasidus, keeping Limud HaTorah is the only focal point in Avodas Hashem, which was the position of the Misnagdim. He mentions that he was speaking to a ninth grader in a local yeshiva, and for fun, I brought this up. And this kid got really worked up about the bezoyon of the holy words of the Torah in the Yum Yum song. They even took out a word to make it fit the tune, and the bad message that those people should look up to musicians who are only selling out concerts to make money. To me, all this is very silly. People connect to Hashem in different ways, and if a disenfranchised person can feel connected by sitting in the back of the wagon with the Baal Shem, I'd rather that than the person going off the derech, being orthoprax or chas v'shalom committing suicide. So I'm going to start us off by saying mea culpa, right? Yeah, in some ways, yes, I sort of was very open about it, that this was something that we were just discovering, and we were just bringing it out. And of course, we're going to bring to the table what we understood about things, but clearly there was more that we could have understood and developed about both of the movements, the Thank You Hashem movement, and those that really feel passionate against it. Rav Meir, I know that you felt that because of these comments and more, that we owed our listeners some sort of explanation or a conversation or a promise.
I think the question is a question that deserves serious reflection. There's so many aspects to this new thing, and they're not all the same. They each deserve to be treated seriously in their own right. And I think it's a discussion of what is anything beyond the confines of simple halacha and limud Torah and davening. That what are those things and how should we analyze them in the eyes of Hashem? So I accept the criticisms as all valid criticisms, both those who came at us from one perspective, those who came at us from the reverse perspective, and therefore I think that it is worth doing a deeper analysis of this phenomena in the future.
One thing I would like to apologize for is somebody said that I made a personal denigrating remark about a certain singer who I don't even know, so I'm not going to repeat his name. I don't really know anything about him. That the implication was that he doesn't learn, and chas v'shalom to imply about any individual he doesn't learn. Again, I don't know this individual, and I apologize if I implied that he doesn't learn Torah, because I certainly would not have said that since I don't know him. But that being said, I would like to talk about this idea which the letter writer book wrote about, and about the neo-Hasidic versus Hasidic phenomenon. It's an important one, which is very, very significant. And I go to Hasidic yeshivas as part of my job, and many Hasidic yeshivas, they have this concept of far togs, where they get up early in the morning to learn Torah at 5 o'clock in the morning before davening.
That was far togs, not far dogs. It was far togs, right?
Probably before the dogs too. A cousin, Reb Chaim Shachid, who's a rav and a chaplain in Muncie, called me this week also to complain on the side that we didn't hit hard enough. And I should say that the fact that we got criticized on both sides for not hitting hard enough, the other for hitting too hard, is a good sign, because when both sides critique you, it's a positive thing. So he said, I should, in Tanya, Perek Mem Aleph, there's a long discussion about the Avodah and lo dai lo era avo levada levasei tov lefachas tzorich leoret tchila hayira tivis hamasoret musteres b'leiv kol Yisrael shelo limro b'melech malchim hakadosh baruch hu. And then he goes on that's not enough either. He goes on to speak a great deal about yira in Perek Mem Aleph, and this is something which is basic to Hasidus too. It's not neo-Hasidism is a problem, because neo-Hasidism focuses on avo without yira, and this is something which I don't think it's wrong for us to push back on. And yes, I'm sure Thank You Hashem does many wonderful things, but if you could put out a song like Kivos Sus Paro Yum Yum, let's be clear, this is not Avodas Hashem. This is not Yiras Hashem. This is something else. And you want to say that we have to focus on Ador and Ava because Ava is much more important, fine. But then recognize this is not authentic Hasidus. This is something which you decided, because the letter writer said, I machshir the letter writer very much. But the moment you throw Suicide Watch in, then we can't have a conversation. Because that means, okay, you know what? They're on Suicide Watch. You have to be very careful what we say, lest we chas v'shalom provoke a suicide. But I think we believe in what Viktor Frankl said, in that you can't just be happy. Happiness is itself an avodah. To be happy, you have to accomplish things in this world. Happiness is a byproduct of accomplishment. And just to say, okay, I'm happy, kiva susparo, yum yum, sudas haliv yason, right? That gives me this great simcha in the world. You're fooling yourself and you're fooling everybody else. So the real simcha means because the taka the song about Yevomis and steiging ois and getting a great or because you're steiging ois and Yevomis and taka Reb Avram the tremendous vote whether we agree with it or not about getting tremendous avodas a yira and ahava out of the Gemara directly without having to learn Musar or Machshava. Okay, whether we agree with it or not, but the Harvanya, the Amelus. It's an essential component of what Yiddishkeit is about, and it doesn't make a difference. You're a Chasidim Misnagid. And to say that this goes back to the Machlekes Chasidus Misnagdus, in my opinion, is a distortion. It's not really Machlekes Chasidus Misnagdus. It's taking Chasidus and shearing off the avoid of Chasidus and focusing, and even in Nigunim Chasidus, like Reb Meir mentioned last week, there are Nigunim Merirus and Nigunim Atzmus, and taking that and focusing just on the happy beppy, as he would put it, type of stuff. It's not the avodah Chasidus. You want to say that new Chasidus is necessary because everybody might commit suicide? Okay, I hear maybe that's true, but let's be clear and understand that this is not a Chasidus misnagdus machlekes.
First of all, in one of the comments, the person made the point that Thank You Hashem has been promoting Divrei Torah and deep Divrei Torah and have been translating Talmidei Chachamim and there are shiurim. And my response there is, okay, look, Ein Adayin Dan Ela Mashen of Royos. Obviously, the most prominent things that we're saying about Thank You Hashem aren't those. They are such a big movement, as you mentioned last week, about how they caused the closing of Pirkei, that we weren't aware that they have these other yodos that might also stress actual text learning and understanding and that. So I feel that even if we had done a deeper dive, it would have been difficult to necessarily, mention that as one of their main thrusts. The other thing I would say is to sort of defend our letter writer is that the tainas against Chassidus do sound similar. You're right. The problem was that if you look at some of the letters that have been collected by Mordechai Vilensky in the letters against Chassidim, a lot of them do sort of echo. Now, obviously, there was a misinformation there, but some of the ideas of that they're not really caring, that they don't care about halacha, that a lot of it is just going to the mikveh and dancing and drinking. So you do see some of that same sort of critique. I don't believe that's the essential debate between Chassidus and Misnagdim. The truth is the Hisayrus against it. He's correct, our letter writer. We've seen this type of Hisayrus before.
Yes, it's true we have, and could well be mistaken in terms of 200 years ago as well as today.
Right.
This guy, the Hasidic approach was completely mistaken. It was completely mistaken then. That Hasidus was not coming to make Avodas Hashem easier. It was coming to deepen it, to make the demands more stringent, not less stringent.
Right.
And it was misunderstood, but a square Shabbos, with the Erlich, a square Bucher on Shabbos, let's just go through his Shabbos. I mean, he's coming to shul before Mincha, he's saying Shir Hashirim, and he's going to come back to shul after his Suda and learn Chumash L'Orach Chaim HaKadosh. He's going to be by the Tish, which this time of year will go from 11 until post 1. He's going to get up Shabbos morning, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 3 hours before davening, go to the mikveh and say Gan Sefer Tehillim until davening. He's going to finish davening whenever it is, 1 o'clock after that time, and go back, hopefully, to some shiurim or Orach Chaim HaKadosh, trying to finish it on the Parsha, and then Shalosh Shudas until 45 minutes to an hour after the Zman. So that Shabbos is more difficult, I think, both in terms of learning and davening and everything else, than, the Shabbos of I don't want to use the term Misnagid because it seems so abrupt, but more stringent than the Shabbos of most people.
We know Chassidus did go through somewhat of an evolution from the first generations as it continued. It got bigger, expanded, and there was definitely different strands of what some Chatzeros stressed over others.
Of course, by Misnagdim also you have Misnagdim light throughout the years, just like Chasim Layam Nisrael. But it's not, again, to say that the avodah of Chassid is happy, beppy, mitzvah b'simcha tamid, on a very superficial level. I think that's a distortion of Chassidus. And Chasidism is not Chassidus.
This is a complex issue, and again, I, as the ultimate editor and producer of the program, the onus is on me. in terms of agreeing to do the subject and in terms of the quality of how we investigated it. If there are people who are from the Thank You Hashem Chevra, or people who are representatives of the real Yidden, whoever you are, if you'd like to be part of the discussion and share with us, we are very, very open.
I want to stress again, before you go on to another topic, this idea which comes to me from Viktor Frankl, which is basically the idea lefum tzara agra, that we don't dispute that hooks are cute and hooks are good, sometimes good. And we don't dispute that it's good to have a positive attitude. But we're saying is that real avodah requires a person to accomplish things in this world. And if you're going to kivrei tzaddikim leads you to, or flying on magic carpets with the Baba Sali leads you to accomplish meaningful things in this world, then perhaps that's a good mavo, a good introduction to happiness in this world. But I think all of us understand that accomplishment is the key, not just trying to put oneself in a good mood. Accomplishment is ultimately what happiness is all about, and that's why we say the Rebbe Rabbeinu Pashischa said Yismach le mevakshe Hashem. Right, you have to constantly be a mevakesh and be a mevakesh in order to be able to have simcha in this world.
But it came to me this morning as I was thinking about this topic, the Yiratzon that we say right after Birchas HaShachar, Targilenu b'seirosecha, v'dabkeinu b'mitzvosecha. And I'm wondering, okay, there's Torah and mitzvahs. So obviously, when you have that type of setup, when you have one umas the other, Torah means limit HaTorah, and mitzvahs means kiyam mitzvahs. So when it comes to Maisa mitzvahs, the bakasha we have, because we don't necessarily have it as a default, is dveikus and asiyas mitzvahs. When it comes to limit HaTorah, what we want is regilus, targilenu b'seirosecha, to feel at home, to feel like Shmuel said, that nehirin li shvili the rekiya k'shvil denardoi, to have a comfort level that comes from learning, that comes from actual understanding, and that only comes, as Rabbi Yosef says, with the work. It only becomes something that you're rogil in if you actually work at it. And we want the Rebbeinu Shalom to allow us to have that sense of, in Limud HaTorah, of regilus, which comes, as I pointed out in last week's program, and it's something I harp on all the time. It comes from being involved, understanding, the feeling that this is your place, and again, and I think that's something that we're mispalel for, because it's hard. But once we're there, the effect is immense. Actually goes together with dveikus in mitzvahs. Dear listeners, when we sit down to record an episode for the Yeshiva of Newark Podcast Network, we're always mindful of one thing: who's listening and why they keep coming back. We know that you're not just tuning in once. You're coming back episode after episode, and that tells us something important. It means our conversations are resonating with you. That kind of impact is humbling, and it's also a responsibility. Producing content that's thoughtful and accessible takes real effort behind the scenes, from professional editing, production, fact-checking, distribution. Each episode represents an enormous commitment. This has been a free service, complete access without any paywalls for over 6 years and counting. I'm reaching out to invite you to partner with us in sustaining and expanding the Yeshiva of Newark podcast platform. Your support will ensure that our existing podcasts continue at a high level of quality. Listeners have told me that they rely on this content day after day, week after week to stay engaged. Every program has a clearly marked link that you can click on to donate for any amount. I want to thank you and our friends from the IDT Corporation for helping make this possible and for being part of an open-minded, Masorah-conscious, Geschmack Hakarai, sprinkled with authentic lumdus community. I'm Avram Kivelevich. Thank you. There's another subject that Rabbi Yosef informed me about. The Jewish Telegraph Agency and others were reporting about a poll that came out, polling American Jews about their connection to Zionism. And it was conducted, I believe, by the North American Federations, and the results were somewhat surprising.
It seems, according to the JTA, that Jews of all ages continue to feel deeply connected to Israel and Israelis. At the same time, just over a third of Jews positively identify as Zionists. which is seems to be a very, very significant drop. I remember when we both remember when Chaim Herzog went to was in the United Nations, and they passed the Zionism is racism proclamation. I think it was 1975. So many Jews came out and said, "Well, we are all Zionists," and this is patching pardon for all Jews. But this seemed evidently not to be the case today.
Especially among a very significant class of people, people from below the age of 35. A very growing amount call themselves anti-Zionists. And many of them believe that Zionism's tenets are that everything Israel does is correct, and everything the state of Israel does is correct, and even a little disturbing point that the Palestinians are not a real people, and that that everything that is done by the government needs to be supported. And they believe that's what Zionism stands for, and that's the reason why many people said that they are not connected to it.
Right. So I know that Reb Meir is an expert on the history of Zionism, so he's certainly welcome to chime in on this. Zionism started out as quite a utopian/socialist movement. That even the Stern Gang, Lehi, there were a lot of rabid socialists in that group, even though you would think that they would be rabid reactionaries on the other side of the spectrum. But no, they were practically communists. So when they were pro-USSR. So, and I think that does not come because they felt that dictatorship is good, but rather they were actually into the proletariat and the Tikkun Olam, which Marxism in its distorted way represents. So it's fascinating that now Zionism, over the years, has become associated with colonialism and the antithesis of what it originally was supposed to represent.
We didn't really see the breakdown in terms of people above the age of 45. And also we saw that the test group that they were asking the questions to was 17% conservative, 40% reform, only 9% Orthodox, and 30% unaffiliated. And again, we're not sure if that really reflects the real number in North America. I know one of the issues that the survey showed was a confusion as to what Zionism is, and therefore how they reacted to that term and what it meant. You had a wide spectrum of interpretations of what Zionism means.
Yes, I think the only viable definition of Zionism as a political movement or a cultural movement is the desire to establish and maintain Jewish political sovereignty over Eretz Israel pre-Mashiach. Now, the problem is with that definition, it loses two of the important subplots of the major plot. It loses the domination of political discourse by a certain school of anti-colonialism, which has decided in the past 10, 15 years to view Jewish sovereignty over Eretz Israel as part of the worldwide, global, Western desire to dominate third world peoples. And that's where I think you get a lot of the falling away from Zionism, because they associate the term with Western dominance of indigenous peoples. On the other side of the coin, you get within the Orthodox many, many Jews who are very happy with Jewish sovereignty, who participate in it, who take delight and compensation from it, and yet would declare themselves to be profoundly or probably anti-Zionist. And that's sort of the Haredi world, who has set up a straw man of what Zionism is. So I think you have to decide which group is being asked. If you would go into a standard Hasidic or yeshiva, and you would ask them, are you boys Zionists? They would say, Chas v'shalom. Chas v'shalom. We're not Zionim. But on the other hand, they would really be supporters in most cases of a very right-wing religious Zionist perspective on the state. So we've got to get these definitions down straight. And conversely, when you go to the non-Orthodox world, you've got this great fear of falling out of step with what some people call political correctness, and therefore they've moved to the we are not Zionist perspective. I'm not sure how much either of them mean it.
I agree with Reb Meir. I think that everybody defines Zionism has no expanded, comprehensive definition except for the very narrow one which he gave, and therefore everybody is free to graft on to that very narrow definition any zeitgeist, any Weltanschauung they want to graft on. And therefore, when you ran a poll like this, where people consider themselves Zionists or not, it's a very inaccurate poll because everybody's going to define Zionism by their definition, which doesn't stop at just let's have a sovereign state in the land of Israel before Mashiach. I think that except for Satmar and the people associated with Satmar, which is significant, but is still a minority, most people go, well, sovereign state, not a bad thing. Maybe it's run according to my ideals or not your ideals. That's better. And I want my type of state and not your type of state. But state, well, most people would say at this point in history, yeah, sure, why not? It's a good thing. But the problem is that everybody attaches their own baggage onto it, and then it becomes much more complicated.
I would just sort of take Satmar out of that to the extent that I think Satmar and mainstream the Turikata have sort of fudged this issue. If you would go to Satmar Yidden today and say, do you want to abandon the state of Israel tomorrow morning? And I think almost all of them would say, Chas v'shalom. They would say, we can't.
Right.
So it becomes, ipso facto, it becomes sort of an aguda position, Satmar. And it's a very small segment of the Turikata, not all the Turikata, who would say the path is only to abandon the state, leave the land if we must. And that would be a tiny, tiny sliver of Klal Yisrael. I don't think the Satmar Rebbes, would you give them power over the state, would say, let's abandon it. So even Satmar is sort of implicitly Zionist.
Yeah, I'm sort of influenced by the theory of semiotics that was I read about it by these Italian scientist and novelist Umberto Eco, and part of what he promotes, which I think is very true, is the idea of what language is and what words mean, and how it's sometimes the wrong thing to be caught up in what original terms are. Now, again, it's fascinating to see the evolving of terms. But when you take a survey, you're talking about people. And in many ways, like as Echo points out, they are the ones who are creating the definition on the ground by using words and language in order to communicate with people. And so even though Rav Meir is right, if you read The Jewish State and any of its translations by Theodor Herzl and other proclamations that were made so many years ago, you're going to see a different definition. The point, though, is that things have changed. The real core is that people have now associated this term with things going on in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore, what I would say is, if this poll was taken October 5th and not now, October 5th, 2023, would it yield the same results? I think what we're talking about, you can't deny that this last number of years has seen such an upsurge of critique and confusion and disappointment with so much that's been happening in Eretz Yisrael. But I think that's really what's going on, is that Zionism has become an easy way to speak about antithetical feeling towards what's been happening in Eretz Yisrael. And I would say even further, Meir, that although you're correct in the original idea of it, that was pre the history of the state, the wars, whatever happened in 1948, and the oppression, if there was oppression of the Palestinian people, and the battles that the Jews fought, whether it was 56 or 67 or 73.
But it also would be that the Haredim have, except for these few cases we discussed before, have completely made their peace with the existence of the state.
Oh, no, you're right.
And they cheer it on in their newspapers. If you say, are you Zionist? They would all say no. So again, the definition has metamorphosized in the mainstream Agudah Haredi world also.
You're right. And there it's the other way around. There, the Satmarov and others have already poisoned that term to the point that, of course, nobody's going to say that. But Lamaisa, they still support the country. They still get dressed up as soldiers.
Well, one has to point out also that the term specifically religious Zionism has been co-opted by Smotrich and Ben Gvir, and the idea of religious Zionism being Rabbi Moshe Lichtenstein and your old Cherusa, Rabbi David Stav, has been fallen by the wayside because they're not the leaders in that society anymore. And therefore, things like religious Zionism have taken on new meaning. And if religious Zionism takes on new meaning, Zionism itself, which is attached to religious Zionism, takes on new meaning. And now people are saying, how can I be a Zionist? If I'm a Zionist, I'm going to be supporting Smotrich and Ben Gvir. Had religious Zionism been Moshe Lichtenstein and David Stav, so many more people would feel, okay, yeah, that I can support that. I can support religious Zionism.
And just to add that left-wing secular Zionism has also pretty much vanished from the map. So you don't have Meretz having any seats in the Knesset. The Mapam is long dead. So even there, it's been taken over by sort of the mainstream right.
So how can we expect, a poll taken for non-scholastic people who are just hearing the news, and especially I said since October 7th, it's really, as disturbing as it is, it's really not surprising. And it really shows us that we are dealing, I think, with a big problem. Rav Meir and I remember it was euphoric across the spectrum about the Israeli victory in 1967.
After 67, yeah, after 67.
Yeah, and even before that, there was an incredible positive sense in the whole society, not just among the Jews. And we are seeing that withering away in front of us.
From 1967 to 1973, we all know was the high point of the excitement about Zionism.
I think one of the main differences has been the complete opening of everything. We didn't know much about Moshe Dayan or Golda Meir.
This is the same thing that Watergate did to the presidency. The Yom Kippur War did to the heroes of Israel. The feet of clay phenomenon, which beforehand was suppressed, then became rose to the fore. So since Watergate, we're very cynical about American
right, but
presidents.
You don't need to be. The thing is, you don't need to be Woodward and Bernstein to discover stuff now about Netanyahu or any of the leaders, whether it's
right.
Smotrich or
before that, people, just like when FDR they suppressed the fact that he was paralyzed, right? These things were suppressed until 1973 in the United States to Watergate, in Israel to the Yom Kippur War. These things were suppressed. The flaws were suppressed, and the presentation was a much more positive one. And then for the last 50 years, things have been going downhill.
Since the PC or the personal computer and email and the cell phone, now everything is open to a point that no one can really emerge as being noble in this political sphere, because they find out everything, and therefore the leaders are exposed for statements that they make, things that they said. And we don't have that sort of, like you say, in the Roosevelt era of waiting for the fireside chat and going to see the newsreel to be pumped up, and therefore it's hard in Eretz Yisrael even itself to say I'm so rah pro of what's going on in the country.
And I think that this is something where we, as Ritz and Ritzcha, would actually bemoan the death of idealism. It's been a long and painful death, as I said, over the past 50 years. Obviously, idealism and realism are in a constant state of clash. And idealism untempered by realism is also very dangerous. But realism untempered by idealism is equally dangerous. And we would like to see, and I speak, I'm sure, on behalf of all of us, and some form of idealism, which tempered by realism, is still the dominant perspective. And therefore, if Zionism would be able to be rehabilitated in a way which would then appeal to the idealism of the greater Jewish public, I think it would be a good thing. Perhaps it's not possible. Perhaps it's too late.
Very hard, because the Haredim are the Haredim, and religious Zionists are mostly right-wing religious Zionists. So the Moshe Lichtenstein voice is not heard at all.
It's possible it's too the ship has sailed and it's too late. But idealism is an essential component of being a real human being. You can't be a Tzelem Elokim unless you want to see this world, and you need to be part and parcel of that. And the death of idealism is not a good thing. It's a very bad thing.
Look, the cynicism that reigns, that comes from the knowledge that our technology gives us, it's hard to rein that in.
Also, tribalism. The Haredi world is frozen where they are because of their tribalism. So I think that's also part of the problem. Our team never took a penalty or got a foul.
Right,
Our team's perfect.
but even the, let's say, somewhat non-affiliated searcher is bombarded by stuff, and therefore it's so hard to develop a path that brings out, noble affiliation. I would say one thing, I quoted Umberto Eco. Let me quote another writer. George Orwell, of course, is really Eric Blair, but he again was also taken by this idea of language. And anyone who's read 1984 knows about Newspeak and the power that we have of altering what words mean. And I'm not suggesting that we have domination by, this dystopian society that Orwell was talking about, but just to take something out of Orwell's ideas, that we can somehow take a term and within a short amount of time, perhaps make it obsolete and defunct. And maybe Zionism has suffered such a beating, but the survey shows there's still people who love the idea that Jews have Eretz Yisrael. They love the fact that Jews have a place to go. They are proud of Jewish accomplishments in Eretz Yisrael and what the state has done. Maybe this term is too hard to resuscitate. It's going to, and maybe we just need to replace it with something else. I mean, we've seen it in the nomenclature that we use for various ethnic groups, right? That's the whole thing now, right? Of what you can, how you can refer to a certain group, and it's been pushed to a point that the other term has been verboten and has been swept out completely. Maybe such a thing. Maybe Zionism needs to hang up the spurs. Maybe Zionism, the term, needs to be replaced with something else. Again, even in its inception, it was scoffed at by people who loved Eretz Yisrael, and loved the idea of life in Eretz Yisrael, but were against it. The famous Tshuva, the Ragat Shover, as you know, when he talks about, he brings all the Meir Mekaymis of what Zion is and where based Zion is. So maybe we just need to, if we scrap the verb, we scrap the word, we can replace it with something which is more noyach, and we can use that to bring people, because as the survey shows, there's still 80% who want Jews to have self-determination and not be threatened in Eretz Yisrael.
Tab Mishism. I just made up the word. It's an acronym of Tikkun Olam B'Malchus Shaddai. Tab Mishism.
Rav Gifter, in that famous denunciation of Rabbi Lamb, he screams there. He says he accuses us of not being Zionim. Who are the greatest Ahavit Zion? It's only the Charedim are the greatest Ahavit Zion. So you need something that reflects an affection for Eretz Yisrael, but where's a hat?
I think you agree with me that we might be in a losing battle to bring Zionism back, the word Zionism. But we may be, as you say, maybe a different term, but that still captures that. And I think for the masses, that might be an easy enough way for them to still feel a connection to Eretz Yisrael, and without necessarily feeling that they're labeling themselves something which, right, they don't want to call themselves that. It could be even among the Charedim to the Mavdalniks or the Chayvavits, whatever you want to call them, the Dati Lumi. Maybe even a simple shift in terminology might make the bridge easier to cross and create a greater sense of connection. But somehow it's possible that people are blind when they hear Zionist, the Zionist entity. Again, it takes its toll. Well, we hope when you hear Rizcha D'Oraisa, when you hear us say that it's time for Rizcha D'Oraisa, that hopefully rings only positive bells for you. On behalf of Rabbi Yosef Gavriel and Rav Meir and Oscar, we wish you, of course, the good Shabbos. And by the way, just to tell you guys, we are going to be coming out with our newsletter, which is going to contain synopses of the programs and places where you can upload your own comments. And it's all in the hopper. But we need, of course, your support to allow us to be the best possible show we can be. Take care, everybody. See you next week. Thanks for listening. And remember about that donation link in the episode show notes. And if you liked what you heard, share it with your friends. Today's episode was produced by me, Avram Kivelevich, with audio production from Eretz Yisrael, Artseinu Akdoisha, by Ben Wallach of Experience Audio. It was edited with love by Tzvi Gordon. Catch you next time. Shalom uvracha.